and good morning to you. This is a Feather of Light podcast, and my name is Brandon Tilt, and I'm your host. This podcast is really just about my reflections around mental health. Sometimes I bring in topics around philosophy or in the spirituality sort of domain. And other times, it can just be about my personal insights. It could be relating to parts work, it could be relating to shamanism or plant medicine. But I really do just want to make this about, in the sort of broader sense, mental health, harm reduction, bring in you into a space of reflection around your needs or healing or self-care, something. I want you to take away something. Maybe you learned something, but I'd also really like you to have some kind of takeaway from these podcast episodes that you're able to apply into your life. So without further ado, let's jump on in. Maybe just grab a snack while you have a second, get some water, get some tea, find a nice cozy spot, do the thing you like to do. Sometimes I like to paint while a podcast is playing. This topic today is going to be, I believe, a couple topics, but first one would be men's work. Talking about bringing men into a container. Could be a more intimate container, of course, just a few men, or it could be a larger group, which I'm not really overly familiar with, but I just want to reflect generally on my experience of what men's work is. And then also maybe tying in a little bit later, I want to tie in the topic of integration of plant medicine, particularly ayahuasca, and just my understanding of what that can look like. So, men's work. What is men's work anyway, right? I think we've seen a lot of different descriptions or depictions of it, right? So, I would say men's work is just finding the time and the space to connect with healthy, quote unquote, healthy, that's my perception of it, but balanced and aligned and embodied masculine presenting energies in your life. Healthy role models, let's just say. And why do we do this? Why would we as men, or, considering that women need to do this too, but as men in particular, in men's work, I would say it's important to do this because you're healing what's called the brother wound, which relates also to the father wound many times. But you're really just finding a capacity to recognize and bring awareness to the fact that you grew up, if you had a brother, which maybe you didn't, but if you had a brother, there's likely some kind of outdated conditioning that was set in place when you were young, right? Let's just say when you were 5 or when you were 10, the relationship you had with your brothers and how that unfolded for the rest of your life, that really sets the standard or the precedent for how you interact with other men your age moving forward, right? This is how the brother dynamic exists within you. And the ways that that relationship was, let's just say, challenged, or there were difficulties in creating connection with your childhood brother or the people in your life that you considered your brothers, that starts to create these disconnects, or that starts to create these, let's just call them internal dynamics, that make it more challenging for you to connect with masculine people in your life moving forward in your adulthood for the rest of your life. And I would say men's work is really designed to bring you closer to masculine energy and feel more of a kinship or more of a healthy bond with that energy, that masculine energy, that brother energy. In addition to this, I would say it's really helpful in reflecting to you, mirroring to you aspects of your own masculine identity that you might feel called to work on, you might feel called to maybe just accept more deeply, There's aspects of you that you might feel the need to work on, but there's also aspects of your own masculine identity you just might need to accept and find more acceptance for those parts of you, I would say. But, more practically speaking, what does men's work look like? I mean, it can look like just hanging out with a friend and just having healthy exchanges, supportive exchanges, creating that allyship, creating that bond, creating that trust in the masculine energy. And I would say in men's work, this can look like a lot of different things. I mean, in the larger retreats, it can look like just doing things with other men, right? Team building in a sense, trusting the masculine in physical embraces and building that capacity to feel safe. And maybe on some level reconditioning, like you put yourself back into situations that maybe when you were, let's just say a teen, that was really wounding. It was very damaging to you mentally and psychologically. Emotionally, it was very challenging, and maybe there was shame involved. And let's just say you went to gym class and you had a terrible time wrestling, right? You just fucking hated that class. It was weird. It was uncomfortable, whatever. And then you just didn't have a positive experience, right? Like you couldn't appreciate the art form. You couldn't appreciate the team building. You didn't feel healthy. You didn't feel like you could have healthy levels of physical contact with other males. And then moving forward, you sort of internalize that. And maybe you go into a space with men in the future and you're able to sort of redefine your relationship to masculine physical contact and not have it be something that feels like it produces shame, not have it be something that feels like it's something to be scared of. And I would say these are the ways that masculine or men's work can be embodied. But I would say that sometimes it's much more subtle and not necessarily as performative and externalized as that. I would say that there is something to just, there's this intimacy with other males that you're trying to re-establish. And I think about it kind of like if you're on a camping trip with another guy, someone whom you respect and appreciate, and it's just like you're in front of a fire and you're just talking about life. You're just talking about what's bothering you. You're opening up in a way, right? You're being vulnerable with other men. And that can be in a group container, like a men's circle, like a group therapy context, but that could also just be a couple guys who feel safe with a couple other men. And it's as simple as that. You're just feeling safe and you're having healthy dialogue and you're feeling into the warmth and connection of the brother energy. And it doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be extreme and transformative and on some level performative. It can just be this sort of like introducing your heart and reintroducing your heart to the masculine energy in a way that feels safe and feels heard, so that you're able to move forward and build trust and know what feels like a good, I would say a safe presence, or what feels like it's a masculine that's aligned and that you would want to call into your family, that you'd want to call into your brotherhood, and what feels like one that's not. And knowing that that's nothing, it's not your responsibility to change that person. It's just, you can recognize that that's a boundary that you need to set for yourself. And then you can find other brothers or masculines that align with who you are and how you choose to show up and what your values are. You're able to have someone who's aligned with those values. I think some examples of when I experienced really healthy masculine energy was when I was at Gaia Sagrada, the retreat in Ecuador, the plant medicine retreat. And there was just so many times where it was just like you'd just be hanging out, sometimes at the hot tubs, right? They had hot tubs. It was nice. This is one of the nicer retreats. And, sometimes it was just in front of the fire after a beautiful Temazcal Ochuma ceremony. And sometimes you don't have to say anything. Sometimes it's just basking in the feeling of brotherhood and just feeling like you're surrounded by people that care about you. and people that don't have any sort of agenda or motive. They're just there, just like you're there. Somehow, some way, the universe brought them into your field, and you're just sitting in front of a fire. Maybe you're, puffing on some tobacco, right? Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're just sitting there and appreciating the smoke and the fire, and sipping some tea if that's your thing. Enjoying a meal with your brothers, watching the fire burn away, maybe playing some music, or maybe you're just talking. Right? Up at the hot tubs, it was like we were often just needing to decompress, and there was just so much stuff going on, so much we were processing doing these ceremonies. It was just, we couldn't possibly have space for it all. So we'd be kind of trying to get away in a sense, setting a boundary, finding a place where we could just have some sort of inner peace. And sometimes another brother would be up there, and it would be a blessing just to have that, one or two people, usually just the one other person. And it would be someone who's another facilitator. So there's not a power dynamic existing necessarily, but sometimes you connect with guests, but just talking, decompressing, letting each person really just feel heard. Sometimes they could just really receive you in that space when you need to be received. And just being vulnerable and feeling safe. Maybe sometimes reflecting on ethics, philosophizing with other men, as I would say is a beautiful component to men's work. It's like this archetype of men gathering in a garden, talking about philosophy, all just kind of exercising their minds, getting excited about the nature of existence. I feel like this is a very healthy masculine bonding exercise as well. And just being received in that energy in its purest form, not feeling like you need to put a mask on it or change it. And this is where I feel like there's a deep need for masculine and feminine to connect and intersect in group spaces and therapeutic ways. And I would say I have quite a few healthy feminine and masculine relationships simultaneously that exist separately from one another. But there's something to having the masculine energy in its purest form, unfiltered, not necessarily like you need to put on the masks or put on the presentation of I am a masculine for sake of how I relate to the world or how I'm presented to the feminine. I feel like we do that a lot, and this is just my take. This is my opinion. This is my perspective. I feel like the masculine, in a sense, changes the way they are on a deeper, more core, primal level. They kind of put on something of a show, That's kind of a bit of a dramatic way of putting it, but they change themselves, or they change the way that they present themselves in certain ways when they are presented with a situation where they might be able to connect with a woman, or they feel like they want to impress them, or they just feel like on some level there's a pressure to kind of like conform to a certain standard of this is the masculine, this is how they ought to be, this is what works. And I don't necessarily believe any of that is necessary when you find the right person who can just receive you as they are, regardless of gender, right? You can just kind of be who you are. But I would say when you're in a space of men who have that capacity to just like be vulnerable and receive other men and have that desire to connect with their fellow brothers, you're not feeling like you need to put on the mask. That mask, often on its own will just kind of slip off and disappear. And you're just talking from a space of vulnerability and authenticity and direct alignment. And there's no need to pretend anymore. There's no need to pretend anymore, guys. There's no need to pretend anymore, gals, women either. And I would say the exact same thing applies to women in various contexts. It's like being real with your sisters, being aligned with the embodiment of the female energy and the authentic expression of that, and not having it be in relation to the male, in relation to the male gaze, in relation to the male perception. It has nothing to do with men when you are able to gather in a group of women, and when women are able to just witness each other in authentic sisterhood, it heals that sisterhood energy as well. So I'm just speaking to that briefly. I think it would be something I'd much rather bring on a woman to interview and have a podcast episode about, but I would certainly love to go into more of the sisterhood wound and how women's circles are run, and maybe interview a women's group facilitator. So that's something I'm curious of. And but that's just to kind of round out the perspective of how I view the men having their own space, the women having their own space. There's certainly a need for the intersection of the two, but in my opinion, there's a value to having men in their own spaces. And this is something I've experienced directly, is just having a couple men in my life whom I speak to regularly, and also considering that I have many women in my life that I appreciate as friends, and we're able to be real with each other and talk about emotions and talk about life and have that healthy balance of friendship and sisterhood, I would say, is something that I also value very deeply. So to bring it back for just a moment, men's groups can be big, men's groups can be small, and I would honor the desire to create those containers as being equal. There's no more of a need for larger containers. There's no more of a need for smaller containers. I think they both serve their purpose, and they both allow men to go into a process that they need to go into. And I think the accessibility is important, right? We're able to all create different types of containers for men, because there's different types of men, and there's different types of brother wounds, and there's different, I guess you could say, different exercises and events appeal to different men, and different age groups, and there's no one size fits all. I personally believe that, whereas there are universal needs that men have, and there's archetypes that all men subscribe to. I would say it's not one size fits all, and just sort of recognizing and validating and acknowledging that, so that we're not trying to fit men into certain categories and have them feel like they need to show up in a certain way in order for it to be a healing experience for them. No, men should have the right, and do have the right, to say no and feel like, their needs are valid, or what they seek in a men's container can look very different from what another person does. And, maybe I'm coming from my own experience of that. Like, what it looks like for me is just having healthy relationships with men, and, building those over time, and having my inner circle, and having my brothers that I trust, and also going out there when I have the opportunity to connect with other men. It just feels like I'm able to bring them into that brotherhood, but by no means am I required to, I'd say, feel like I need to go outside my comfort zone, and in a way, like, overly identify with my healing process being just about working with men. And that's just my lens. I feel like I will always work with men, but I don't feel at this point the call to kind of identify with that as a primary role within my process as a healer. I do believe in the equality of men and women, and I believe of being of service to men and women equally, and recognizing there's a role for those separate containers, and there's a role for those containers that allow the healing of the masculine and the feminine simultaneously. So to branch into this other topic that I brought in, it's a big one, and I don't know how much time I'll have here, but I'm just going to kind of riff a bit. Ayahuasca integration, which I touched on very briefly. I related it to the preparation process before, so dieta, making sure that you have certain restrictions in place so that you're not just going into ayahuasca and bringing in all this external energy that the plant spirit might not necessarily want to work with, or might not necessarily align with. And then obviously there's this after process. Once you've done this ceremony or ceremonies and you're back in the regular world, holy crap, that can be an adjustment. And oftentimes there's a lot of loosening of what was deeply stored trauma, and now the body's maybe more easily dysregulated. Maybe there's just like you have these dreams that you just don't know what to make sense of, and maybe you just don't feel, I don't know, safe in certain ways. Like there's some kind of trauma that's come up and it's creating all these thoughts or triggers that you didn't have otherwise. So just honoring that there is a experience of integration. There's a window of integration that follows leaving an ayahuasca retreat, and oftentimes that can extend onto a year or longer. But for me, you know, a lot of this process, I would say, is you can effectively start to work with some of the medicine, let's just call it, through talking with other people, through being witnessed in groups, through, you know, maybe even doing some sort of integration program through the retreat, right? Those exist in some retreats. But for me, it was about painting, and then noticing how in the stages of transformation, I'm trying to kind of understand more about what was actually doing the healing before in my life when I was taking psychedelics and doing all these kind of, let's just call them spiritual things, right? Practices, events, you know, whatever it is you would consider all these different sort of spiritual things that you do or people do. And what was actually doing the healing? Like what was actually contributing to change or growth or healing? You know, I know these are some pretty bold claims. I'm not going to pretend that this is like the end all absolute truth to it, but I realized very recently that the way I viewed plant medicines and ayahuasca seemed to relate to this idea of it being this, I guess, cure in a way. Like, as much as I didn't believe that consciously, I do now see that there was a unconscious belief that played out around that I was going here to seek this medicine for sake of it, like healing something within me that it had the capacity to remove. And that was how it worked. And that's why I was going there, right? That's why I was investing so much of my energy. And the shaman was also there for a similar purpose. It's like I couldn't do the thing without them. And they certainly facilitated a process. I'm not going to say they didn't, because they, in combination with the medicine, the retreat, the entire experience surrounding the retreat, and then the intervention of the shamans, they allowed me to connect to something that I honestly believe I couldn't have connected to on my own. At least not through the regular lifestyle decisions that I've been making, even in the whole realm of spirituality and all the things I was doing. But I do believe that there's something of a process of like starting a cycle. I do very strongly believe that when you start to work with a psychedelic, let's just say a deeper dose, right? A microdose doesn't really fit this criteria, but you do a higher dose of, say, mushrooms, or you get an ego death from acid. That's something of an example, but it's not quite what I'm comparing it to directly. Or you're just releasing a lot, you know, you're really starting down a certain path. And I would say ayahuasca or other plant medicines that have a ceremonial context really are the best example, I would say, of this process. But let's just say they all do the same thing in a way. They're starting you on a cycle, right? And that cycle, for me at least, it just kept getting reset. I kept hitting the reset button. I use this metaphor above, like, there's an etch-a-sketch, right? And I'm starting to draw a picture, right? I start drawing the picture as soon as I take the psychedelic, as soon as I sit in a ceremony, smoke DMT, whatever. And then you're starting to draw this picture on your etch-a-sketch. And you're like, ooh, this is getting kind of real. This is kind of starting to show me something I really don't want to see. And the further you get into this cycle, I'd say the clearer the image gets, or the more disturbing, or the more symbolic this picture gets. starts to really show you something that you can start to really understand, and maybe it brings up some kind of emotions. And for me, I'm like, oh, all right, that's enough. That's enough of this Etch-a-Sketch. It's told me too much. So you shake it up by taking another psychedelic. That was my experience. It's like, oh, well, every 3, 4, 5 months, the depression comes back. This, something I've faced has triggered something that I feel like I need to reset again. So I would go and seek another experience that would shake the Etch-a-Sketch, and then I'm back to square one. I'm back to that beautiful, pleasant, blissful rebirth. We've started again. Newborn baby, right? Shake the Etch-a-Sketch, newborn baby. All right, newborn baby. What's newborn baby got to do? What's newborn baby get to do? I get to experience the lightness and the love and the appreciation and the connectedness to spirit and all this awesome stuff. And it's kind of like, but then you gradually start to get deeper, 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 You start to go back down into this image of the truth, and it starts to sort of get clearer and clearer and scarier and realer. And it's like, you're like, I don't want to fuck with that. I'm going to shake the Etch-a-Sketch again. Because you know what? Being back to newborn baby, connected to spirituality, that's where I want to be. That's what feels good. On some level, that's what I know to work. And I feel like lately I've been at this stage where I'm just allowing that Etch-a-Sketch to get grimier and realer and project back to me even darker truths, and not sitting here and saying, oh man, I'm back in the bitterness and the sadness and the loneliness and the feelings of despair. Those are the things that are indicators that I need to get back to some kind of happy, healthy, balanced, loving, spiritual place through whatever means necessary, essentially. Could be a plant medicine retreat. Could be, oftentimes for me, it was something as serious or as, I guess, like, intense of an intervention as a psychedelic. But, you can sort of soften this experience. Like, you can distract yourself a little bit. You can go out into nature and feel the medicine. And ideally, you can just like paint or do something or talk with a person in a way that makes you feel like those emotions aren't sending you into some spiral where you're just like stuck in those challenging emotions. So it's kind of like experiencing those challenging emotions, not having them take over your life necessarily, but having them be present and allowing space for them in a way that's not making you feel like you need to go and search for the next big fix, which I would propose, if you follow how these cycles operate, it's not the next big fix. It's not something outside of you. This is where I'm also trying to bring awareness to my own capacity to externalize. It's kind of like the deep dark starts to surface in a dream or in a thought or in an emotion, or there's something in you just don't like, and it's kind of like, yeah, that ain't me. No, that ain't me. That's something I need to remove from me, right? That's something related to the ceremony I was in, or that's something related to whatever, right? And what if it is you? I'm just sort of like entertaining this idea, right? What if it is you, and pushing yourself further away from getting into that experience and that feeling and owning it, and in a sense nurturing what it is you need to nurture to really be with it. It does feel like the further we get into working with plant medicine, the harder it gets to really be real with ourselves, because there's so much of and let's just call it an opportunity or a window for the spiritual ego to get strengthened. And I think we're somewhat familiar in this culture with the spiritual ego. It's kind of like, I'm doing this thing so that I can get rid of the ego, right? And then all of a sudden you're noticing how you're starting to compare yourself to others and think, you're holier than thou because you've gone and drank ayahuasca or something. Or I'm a vegan, so, all people that eat meat are assholes. It's like, these are traps of the spiritual ego coming in. And I think the spiritual ego also kind of distorts a lot of things in terms of the process of just sitting with our darkness. It chooses to, on some sense, demonize certain symbols or certain feelings or certain sensations within ourselves that are I would say nothing to be afraid of. On some level, we shouldn't be getting caught up within this script or program of there's the demon. There it is. Look at that demon. You're kind of like watching movies and you see all these like creepy, grungy, scary things, and you're kind of like, oh, there it is. I know what it looks like. I know what that is. Now I can avoid it, and that's great. Now I know how to better avoid that dark, gross, disgusting, scary, quote unquote demonic thing. And it's kind of like, I don't feel like those things actually, in a sense, exist external to us, as much as there's people that embody certain energies that we can be aware of. But like our mind really likes to kind of like search for and pinpoint something external to us. And I'm not trying to completely dismantle the understanding that there is anything that can harm us, because that's not true at all. There's obviously things that are external to us that present harm, and we need to listen to our intuition and understand that, we need to set boundaries around these things and create safety within ourselves. And on some level, there are things out there that are going to harm us. But it's like, I believe we've blown the idea out of proportion based on media, and maybe based on the sort of the beliefs that are ingrained around light and darkness. Religions kind of do this in certain ways. So yeah, I guess I'm just trying to really bring back this idea that the ayahuasca integration for me has brought me to the realization that the darkness actually exists deep within me, and that's okay. And the more I try to push it away or shake away the Etch-a-Sketch so that I don't get another, let's just say, the evidence doesn't point towards the fact that it's deeper within me, and that I can't just kind of, cut it away like or saw it off like a diseased limb. It just doesn't work like that. Yeah, the more I do that, the less I'm actually able to truly heal it and love the darkness. Like, this is one thing Aubrey Marcus said one of his takeaways from his ayahuasca ceremonies, which I really resonate with, is you just kind of have to love the darkest, biggest, scariest demonic thing that you see in the ayahuasca ceremony. The only way to really heal it and quote unquote beat it is to love it. And we say loving your shadow is kind of like the way to heal, and I think we all kind of on some level agree with that. But how much do we actually do it? How much can we actually offer acceptance and grace and love and support to something that feels like it's the thing we just need to get out? We need to puke it out. We need to shit it out. We need to whatever, right? Cast it away. Anywho, maybe I didn't talk a lot about ayahuasca integration here. Maybe talked about kind of my belief around how we avoid ayahuasca integration, or we avoid the I would say the ability to do the real work gets kind of sidestepped. But like, more practically speaking, doing ayahuasca integration is just looking at yourself more honestly, and maybe taking steps to put yourself in uncomfortable situations where you face your fears more. Maybe normalizing the fact that sometimes you're going to have dark thoughts. Sometimes you're going to have scary dreams. Sometimes you're not going to like who you are on some level, and that doesn't mean you need to change who you are necessarily. Healing's not necessarily just about changing who you are, whereas sometimes it can be. But I would say it's so much about finding acceptance for who you have always been and maybe always will be. And in relation to other, having acceptance for who people are and accepting them as they are and who they will always be, and recognizing that you can't change people. It's not your job to change people, right? That's where the savior complex comes in. Oh, I got to save people, right? No, you don't. I would propose that people don't need to be saved. People just need to be accepted and loved. And if you can't do that, that's okay. That just move on. Go find people that maybe on some level you can accept and you can love, or set boundaries around people until you're able to love the parts of you that are getting in the way of accepting and loving others. And that's just my take. I don't want to get too overly authoritative here and be like, yep, this is how it is. I'm the authority. But it's like, no, I do genuinely believe when we accept ourselves and we heal the parts of us that are getting in the way of connection and getting in the way of accepting others as they are, it gets so much easier to notice how much love and compassion we have towards others. We genuinely have. Like it's not something we have to force, not something we have to necessarily practice or cultivate. It's just something that we have. It's just something that innately exists. It's an energy that we all tap into. But I would say it gets distorted from the mind or the ego or whatever. And when we're able to get those things out of the way, get out of our own way, there it is. There's love right in front of us. Get out of your own way. And then it's waiting for you to just embrace it, to just tap into it, to just feel it in the body innately, simply, fully. And that's where, in conclusion, I love how when you feel something fully, you can let it go. And then the love, I would say, the love surfaces. It's like you scream, you cry, you spit out these quote unquote poisonous words in a way, or release this aggressive energy. Ideally not with people that anyone really, but especially people that you care about. Unfortunately, that's how it goes. But you release that, and then like a soft tide flowing in, the warmth and the love and the joy just starts to gradually wash over you. Like, this is a beautiful metaphor for what I experienced in the ayahuasca ceremonies. Is like, you start to feel that puke building up. Oh boy, is that scary. Oh boy, does that bring in a lot of fear and darkness. And you're just kind of like, oh boy, it's building up. It's building up. Can I handle this? Can I handle this? Am I ready? Then you just kind of have to be like, yep, it's time. It's time for the medicine to do its magic. And once you've really just violently and intensely just let it all out, let it all go, no inhibitions, doesn't matter how you sound, it's beautiful that you're releasing. It's beautiful that you're able to tap into that deeper release. And then, oh my God, how you feel after that is bliss. It's just love, just pure love and connectedness. And you've just let go. Once you've let go, there it is. There's love. Once you've let go of the pain and the suffering. And it's not as simple as just like snap your fingers and let go. But once you've gotten to the point of where you've had the ability to let go, there it is. It just flows in softly, like a gentle breeze or like a wave just washing over you. And not forcing it. Not being like, now love, now, give me that love. It's time. I've worked for this. I deserve this. I'm going to white knuckle my way through an experience so that love can come in. It's like, no, I really don't believe that's the way to love. That doesn't feel like love. That doesn't sound like love to me. So I just wanted to close with that if anyone feels called, I don't know if anyone feels called after this episode of just all this authentic, raw expression. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if anyone feels called to work with me, I am looking for a couple counseling clients whom I'd love to dedicate time to and love to dedicate space to. And we can go deep. We can go deep with parts work. We can go deep with art. I love to use that as a tool. Or we can just talk. There's no need to get into all the fancy tools. I love to just receive people and give them that space to be in their expression, to go into their past, to explore what's coming up for them. And this is what I do. This is what I'm passionate about. This is how I am of service. So if anyone feels called, please feel free to reach out and we'll talk about building that container and building that trust. And with that, I would love to say, be gentle with yourself. Take care of your body. Do what nurtures the soul. And have a wonderful rest of your day.